Welcome to Fortune Forecast. I am Daisy, and you are in my book playlist where we have started on the book titled The Heart of the New Thought by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. If you're ready to jump into the next chapter, visit the description and hit on the timestamp link. You can get started with that. Otherwise, I invite you to stay a spat here as I share my narrator's comments. And again, if you're new to the channel, welcome, and to our Fortune community, welcome back. As I go through the chapters, I get this feeling from the author that this is a person that is really caring and kind and wants to share with me the best advice so that I can have the best life ever. There is no admonishing, there is no shame, there is no militant style that you have to do this 1, 2, 3, yet there is an orderly sense of culture, of discipline, of compassion in the wisdom that she is sharing. Like, let's suppose this ancient wisdom we've heard so many times. Man is what he thinks. It may seem cliche, yet think about your own thoughts. And think how sometimes we are immersed in our thoughts and how these thoughts either take us to a dark place or take us to a very light place. And in a very surreal way, these thoughts do have a way of somehow reflecting themselves in our lives. And of course, the thoughts are the house we keep. And what order are we keeping that house in? And going back to the law of cause and effect, I believe learning as much as I'm learning and what science is revealing every day about energy, and that thought in somehow is a form of energy. So if we can really become responsible about the thoughts that we harbor and understand the power of suggestion, if we can be suggested by advertising that kind of just show up in a picture on a billboard, and somehow we're at the store buying and not realizing where did that come from. Imagine what our thoughts, the predominant thoughts, is doing to us. And so there is, by default, the law of cause and effect is happening, whether we agree with it or not. It's happening. That's nature's law. And I think that the sooner that we become in a mutual dance with nature's law, and we join the dance responsibly, we can begin to appreciate a better quality of life because we become co-creator, aware, like a conscious co-creator. I don't know. What do you think about that? I think I've moved on a little bit too much and I've expounded but this is, I guess, what this author is inciting in my mind, the ability to see something in a more subjective way, a more poetic way, because she is predominantly known for poetry, for writing poetry. So my mind, I guess, is aligning to all the creative art of words. So let's move on now to the next chapter titled Invincibility. If we persistently desire good things to come to us for unselfish purposes, and at the same time faithfully perform the duties which lie nearest, we will eventually find our desires being realized in the most unexpected manner. Our thought force has proved to be a wedge, opening the seemingly inaccessible wall of circumstance. To read good books, to think and ponder on what you read, to cultivate every agreeable quality you observe in others, and to weed from your nature every unworthy and disagreeable trait, to study humanity with an idea of being helpful and sympathetic, all these efforts will help you to the ultimate attainment of your wishes. It is a proven fact that if we devote a few moments each day to reaching exercises, standing with loose garments and stretching the body muscles to reach some point above us, we increase our stature. Just so, if we mentally and spiritually are continually reaching to a higher plane, we are growing. Every least thought of the brain is a chisel, chipping away at our characters, and our characters are building our destinies. The incessant and persistent demand of our hearts and minds must be granted. The mental chisel. During a trolley ride through a thrifty New England locality where church spires were almost as plentiful as trees, I studied the faces of the people who came into the car during my 2 hours journey. The day was beautiful, and all along the route our numbers were recruited by bevies of women, young, middle-aged, and old, who were bent on shopping expeditions or setting forth to make social calls. They went and came at each village through which our coach of democracy passed, and they represented all classes. The young girls were lovely, as young girls are the world over. Their complexion possessed that soft, tender luster peculiar to seashore localities, for the salty breath of Father Neptune is the greatest of cosmetics. Many of the young faces were formed in classic mold, their features clearly cut and refined, and severe like the thoughts and principles of their ancestors. Often I observed a mother and some female relative, presumably an aunt, in company with a young relative, and always the sharpening and withering process of the years of set and unelastic thought was discernible upon their faces, which had once been young and classic and attractive. In the entire 2 hours, I saw but 3 lovely faces which were matured by time. I saw scores of well-dressed and evidently well-cared-for women of middle age, whose countenances were furrowed, drawn, pinched, sallow, and worn beyond excuse. For time, sorrow, and sickness are not plausible excuses for such ravages upon a face God drew in lines of beauty. Time should mature a woman's beauty as it does that of a tree. Sorrow should glorify it as does the frost of the tree, and sickness should not be allowed to lay a lingering touch upon it until death calls the spirit away. Without question, the great majority of the women I saw were earnest Orthodox Christians. I heard snatches of conversations regarding church and charities, and I have no doubt that each woman among them believed herself to be a disciple of Christ. Yet, where was the result of the loving, tender, sweet spirit of Christ's teaching? It was surely not visible upon those pinched and worried faces, and those faces were certain and truthful chronicles of the work done by the minds within. One face said to me in every line, "I talk about God's goodness and loving kindness, but I worry over the dust in the spare room. I fret about our expenses. I am troubled about my lungs, and I fear my husband has an unregenerate heart. I never know an hour's peace, for even in my sleep I worry, but of course I know I will be saved by the blood of Christ." Another said, "I am in God's fold, well and safe, but I hate and despise my nearest neighbor, for she wears clothes that I am sure she cannot pay for, and her children are always dressed better than mine. I quarrel with my domestics, and I am always in trouble of some kind, just because human beings are so full of sin, and no one but myself is ever right. I shall be so glad to leave this world of woe and go to heaven, but I hope I will not meet many of my present acquaintances there." Another said, "If I only had good health, but I was born to sickness and suffering, and it is God's will that I should suffer. Oh, the pity of it, and to imagine this is religion. Thank God the wave of new thought is sweeping over the land and washing away those old blasphemous errors of mistaken creeds. The new thought is to give us a new race of beautiful, middle-aged, and old people. Today, in any part of the land among rich, poor, ignorant, or intellectual, orthodox or materialist, the beautiful, mature face is rarer than a white blackbird is in the woods. It is impossible to be plain ugly or uninteresting in late life if the mind keeps itself occupied with right thinking. The withered and drawn face of 50 indicates withered emotions and drawn and perverted ambitions. The dried and sallow face tells its story of dried-up sympathies and hopes. The furrowed face tells of acid cares eating into the heart. All this is irreligious, yet all this prevails extensively in our most conservative and churchy communities. He who in truth trusts God cannot worry. He who loves God and mankind cannot become dried and withered at 50, for love will recreate his blood and renew the fires of his eye. He who understands his own divine nature will grow more beautiful with the passing of time, for the God within will become each year more visible. The really reverent soul accepts its sorrows as blessings in disguise, and he who so accepts them is beautified and glorified by them, within and without. Are you growing more attractive as you advance in life? Is your eye softer and deeper? Is your mouth kinder? Your expression more sympathetic? Or are you screwing up your face in tense knots of worry? Are your eyes growing hopeless and dull? Is your mouth drooping at the corners and becoming a set thin line in the center? And is your skin dry and sallow and parched? Study yourself and answer these questions to your own soul. For in the answer depends the decision whether you really love and trust God and believe in your own immortal spirit, or whether you are a mere impostor in the court of faith. The object of life. What do you believe to be the object of your life? To be happy and successful, perhaps you are thinking, even if you do not answer in those words. That is the idea of the many. Meanwhile, others who have been educated in the melancholy faith of their ancestors believe the object of this life is to be miserable, poor, and full of sorrow, that they may wear a crown of glory hereafter. But the clear thinker and careful observer must realize that there is one and only one main object in life: the building of character. He who sets out in early youth with that ambition and purpose and keeps to it will not only attain his object, but he will, too, attain happiness and true success. For there is no such thing as failure for the man or woman of character. We often apply the two words character and success unworthily. We speak of a man of much character when he is merely self-assertive and stubborn, and we call a man successful who has accumulated a fortune or achieved fame and a position by doubtful methods. Then what is character and what is success? Character is the result of the cultivation of the highest and noblest qualities in human nature, and putting those qualities to practical use. Success is the conquest of the lower and baser self, and the ability to be useful to one's fellow men. There are men of brain, wealth, and position who are failures, and there are men of limited abilities and in humble places who are yet successful, inasmuch as they make the utmost of themselves and their opportunities. It makes no difference how lowly your sphere in life may be, and no matter how limited your environment, you can build your character if you will. You need no outlay of money, no assistance from those in power, no influence. Character building must be done alone and by yourself. The ground must be cleansed of debris, and the structure must be erected stone by stone. It is dull, slow, hard work, especially the preparation. All preparation is drudgery. When this little whirling globe of ours began to cool in space, think what a task lay before it. Think of the mass of chaos which had to slowly shape itself into mighty, green, glad, and snow-capped mountains, fertile vales, and noble forests. Each one of us is a little world, whirling alone on an individual orbit, but the divine power is within us to grow into symmetry, beauty, and perfection if we only realize it. And the happiness of the work, once we begin it, is beyond the power of description. There is no other satisfaction can compare with that of looking back across the years and finding that you have grown in self-control, in charity of judgment, in a sense of justice, in generosity, and in unselfishness. If you are conscious of this growth, let no lack of material success for one moment disturb you. That will come, enough for your need in time. The man of symmetrically developed character is never a pauper. He is never dependent for more than a temporary period. To possess character is to be useful, and to be useful is to be independent, and to be useful and independent is to be happy, even in the midst of sorrow, for sorrow is not necessarily unhappiness. The man who has made the development of a noble and harmonious character the business of his life accepts his sorrows as means of greater growth, and finds in them an exaltation of spirit which is closely allied to happiness. To such a nature, absolute wretchedness would only be possible through the loss of self-respect, the lowering of an ideal, or the failure of a principle. Would you be happy and successful? Then set yourself to build character. Seek to be worthy of your own highest commendation. Wisdom. Great many people are attracted to the new thought of the day by its declaration of our right to material wealth and by its claim that the mind of man can create, command, and control conditions which produce wealth. There is no question concerning the truth of this claim. But woe unto him who cultivates his mental and spiritual powers only for this purpose. His gold shall turn to dross, his pleasure to Dead Sea fruit. He shall be as one who drags a beautiful garment through the mud of the streets, and while clothed in purple and fine linen is yet a repulsive object. Into the great scheme of existence, as first conceived by the Creator, money did not enter. He made this beautiful universe, and all that it contains was meant for the enjoyment of his creatures. There was no millionaire and no pauper soul created by God. Each soul contains the spark of the divine spirit, and by the realization of that spark and all it means, whatever is desired by mortal man may come to him. But wise is he who remembers the injunction. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all other things shall be added unto you. Wise is he who understands the meaning of the words, unto him that hath, more shall be given. Not until you obtain the faculty of being happy through your spiritual and mental faculties, independent of material conditions, not until you learn to value wealth only as a means of helpfulness, can you safely turn your powers of concentration upon the idea of opulence. To demand, assert, and command wealth for its mere sensual benefits, to focus your mind upon it because you desire to shine, lead, and triumph, is to play spiritual football with spiritual dynamite. You may obtain what you seek, you may accumulate riches, but at the cost of all that is worth living for. The merely ignorant or stupid or wholly material man who stumbles into a fortune through inheritance, dogged, persistent industry, or chance may enjoy it in his own fashion and do no harm in the world. But the man who knows and who has developed his spiritual powers only for the purpose of commanding material gain might better have a millstone tied upon his neck, for he makes himself a spiritual outcast, and his money shall never bring him happiness. Make therefore your assertion of opulence the last in your list, as you make love first. Call unto yourself spiritual insight, absolute unselfishness, desire for universal good, wisdom, justice, and usefulness, and last of all, opulence. Think of yourself as possessed of all these qualities before you picture financial independence. For without love for your kind, without the desire for usefulness, and the spiritual insight and the wisdom to be just before being generous, your money would bring you only temporary pleasure and would do the world no good. Neither should you labor under the impression that God's work is lying undone because you have no fortune to command and wisely distribute where most needed. Rest assured, If you do the work which lies nearest to you, relieve such distress as is possible to you, and keep your faith in the ultimate justice of God's ways, that the world will move on, and humanity will slowly attain its destined goal, even if you never become a millionaire. Self-conquest. Every new idea, or supposed new idea, is a light which attracts the moths. The new thought is no exception. About it flutter hysterical women, unbalanced men, the erratic and the irresponsible. The possibilities of performing miracles, of healing the sick, hypnotizing the well, transforming poverty into wealth, and changing age to youth, are the rays of light which flicker through the darkness and draw them into the circle of radiance. The self-indulgent fat woman subscribes to New Thought literature, pays for a course of lectures, and goes forth into the ranks of the unbelievers, proclaiming her power to become a sylph, and to cause others to become sylphs. The extravagant and inconsiderate rush forth after having heard a discourse upon the power of mind over matter, and declare that they possess the secret of accumulating a fortune by occult means. The lovers of the marvelous believe that they will become great healers in a brief space of time. Not one of these moth converts realizes that the very first step to take in the direction of new thought is self-conquest. The gourmand does not know that self-indulgence and a gross appetite are incompatible with mental or spiritual growth and will be insurmountable obstacles in her path towards symmetry. The spendthrift does not take into consideration the fact that good sense, thrift, and industry must aid his mental assertion of wealth, and the miracle lover does not understand that something greater and more difficult is required than a mere wish to heal before healing powers can be obtained. That the physical body and material conditions can be dominated by the divine spirit in man is an incontrovertible fact. But first, last, and always, the lesser self must be subjugated, and the weak and unworthy qualities overcome. The woman who desires to reduce her flesh cannot do so by reading occult literature or joining mystic circles or attending lectures unless she permeates herself so thoroughly with spiritual truths that she no longer craves 6 courses at dinner and 3 meals a day, and unless she overcomes her dislike for exercise. The man who wishes to control circumstances must love better things than money before he can succeed. He must love and respect and believe in his Creator and trust the divine man within himself, and he must illustrate this love and trust by his daily conduct and his home circle and in his business relations. Once in a century, perhaps, is a man born with great powers already developed to heal the sick or to do other seeming miracles. Such beings are old souls who have obtained diplomas in former lives. But the majority of us are still in school, and we cannot become seniors until we pass through the lower grades. We must change ourselves before we can change material conditions. We must heal our own thoughts and make them sane and normal before we can heal bodily disease in others. It is not an immediate process. I have heard an old lady declare that she got religion in the twinkling of an eye, and she believed all people would be damned and burn in hellfire who did not pass through this sudden illumination. It is possible that the religion which can worship a God cruel enough to burn his children in fire can only be obtained in the twinkling of an eye. But the reverent, wholesome, and beautiful religion of New Thought must be grown into little by little through patience, faith, and practice. All that it claims to do, it can do, but not instantaneously, not rapidly. We must first make ourselves over. After absolute control of our minds has been obtained, then and only then may we hope to influence circumstances and health. The Important Trifles. You will find in the effort to reach a higher spirituality in your daily life that the small things try your patience and your strength more than the greater ones. Home life, like business life, is composed of an accumulation of trifles. There are people who bear great sorrows with resignation and seem to gain a certain dignity and force of character through trouble, but who are utterly vanquished by trivial annoyances. The old-fashioned Orthodox Christian was frequently of this order. Death, poverty, and misfortune he bore without complaining, and became ofttimes a more agreeable companion in times of deepest sorrow. He regarded all such experiences as the will of God, and bowed to them. Yet, if his dinner was late, his coffee below the standard, if his eyeglasses were misplaced, or his toe trodden upon, he became a raging lion, and his roar drove his affrighted household into dark corners. There have been neighborhood angels who watched beside the dying sinner, sustained orphans and widows, and endured great troubles sublimely like martyrs. But if a dusty shoe trod upon a fleshly washed floor, or husband or child came tardily to the breakfast table, or lingered outside the door after regulation hour for retiring, lo, the angel became a virago, or a droning mosquito with persistent sting. The new philosophy demands serenity and patience through small trials, as well as fortitude in meeting life's larger ills. It demands, too, that we seek to avoid giving others unnecessary irritation by a thoughtless disregard of the importance of trifles. A man is more likely to keep calm if he wakes in the night and discovers that the house is on fire than he is if, on being fully prepared to retire, he finds the only mug on the third story is missing from his washstand, or the cake of toilet soap he asked for the day before has been forgotten. A mother bears the affliction of a crippled child with more equanimity than she is able to bring to bear upon the continual thoughtlessness of a strong one. To be kind means to be thoughtful. The kindest and most loving heart will sometimes forget and be careless, but it cannot be perpetually forgetful and careless of another's wishes and needs, even in the merest trifles. End of these chapters. Let's move on to the next video, and before you do, can you be so kind, hit that like button, let me know you were here, leave me a comment, and share with me your highlight on this particular chapter. All right, the next few chapters are going to be really interesting. The author shares on destiny, the breath, generosity, and balance.